Welcome back to another Midnight Tales. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for new stories.
Midnight Tales, Echoes of the Wild. The Appalachian Mountains carry a silence that unsettles even the bravest of men. Step deep enough into the hollows, and you'll feel eyes upon you, not the human kind, but something else. The kind that have watched since long before the first cabin was built, or the first road was cut through stone. Strange stories drift from those mountains and forests of a figure moving between trees, quick as a fox and quiet as falling snow. Hunters say their dogs grow restless when he is near, as though sensing something not of this world. Some claim he can hear a storm days before the sky darkens, or sense a man long before his footsteps break a twig. Others whisper that he speaks with the wolves, that owls answer his call, and that he vanishes into the forest as though the bark and bramble themselves open to swallow him whole. No one remembers a mother or father, only that one autumn night, long ago, a child's cry was carried on the wind, and by morning the sound had become part of the forest itself. Wolves hushed their howls to listen. Pines bent low, their spirits whispering lullabies older than men. The mountain folk tell it plain. He was not raised by hands of flesh, but by the patience of rivers, the cunning of foxes, and the watchful guard of the dead who linger between bark and root. Protected from darker things that prowl the ridges, the boy grew into the wilderness, a son not of man, but of the mountain. For near 20 years he belonged to no hearth and no roof, but the open sky. The spirits kept him hidden from men. Travelers lost their way before they could stumble too close. Hunters' paths bent away from his hollows. The forest itself turned strangers' feet, so they would never meet the child it had claimed. He knew of fire only as lightning's gift, and of language only as whispers in the trees. Men were stories carried on the wind, harsh, sharp-tongued creatures who cut too deeply into the earth. The spirits warned him of them. The wolves growled low when the smell of smoke carried up from the lowlands, and so he stayed where he was safe. But curiosity is a hunger of its own. It began with a footprint, broad, heavy, not belonging to deer or bear. He crouched low, pressing his hand into the print, feeling its strange shape. He followed the scent of iron and salt, the clatter of something unnatural against stone. His heart quickened with both fear and wonder. And then, voices, not whispers of spirits, not the calls of beasts, but something harsher, human. He crept close, belly to earth, every nerve alive with the urge to flee. Yet he could not turn away. His keen eyes caught sight of them, men moving through the undergrowth, wearing colors the forest did not know, carrying weapons of metal and light. They were clumsy, noisy things, stumbling where he would glide, laughing where silence was needed. For the first time in his life, he saw men not as shadows in a tale, but as flesh, and something inside him shifted. He did not go to them that first day. Instead, he crouched among the laurels, his body pressed low, hidden by the green and the hush of pine needles. He studied their faces, their hands, the odd things they carried, sticks that spat fire, knives that gleamed like the moon, skin covered not in fur, but in colored cloth that clung like bark to a tree. The boy did not understand their words, but the rhythm of their voices intrigued him. harsh, broken sounds, nothing like the flowing speech of spirits or the rumble of wolves. He returned to watch them again and again, always from shadow, always unseen. Days stretched into weeks, and each time the men came, he was there, silent as mist. He learned their patterns, how they broke bread around the fire, how they drank from shining containers, how they stared into glowing boxes that spat light like captured fireflies. The spirits whispered warnings in the dark. Do not linger. Do not stray so near. But the boy's curiosity had taken root, stubborn as ivy. His keen eyes drank in every detail. His sharp ears gathered every strange sound. He began to mimic them in secret, shaping his mouth around their rough syllables, standing tall on 2 feet as they did, though it felt strange and stiff. The animals grew restless. A wolf snapped at him one night when he returned from watching too long, its yellow eyes fierce with reproach. Even the owls turned their heads away, refusing to meet his gaze. But the boy could not stop. Men were different. Men were dangerous. And still, he hungered to know them. One evening, after the men had gone, he crept from hiding. The fire they'd built still smoldered, coughing thin gray smoke into the dusk. He circled it warily, drawn by the heat that clung to the stones. Never had he seen fire harnessed this way, tamed and left behind like a chained beast. He reached toward it, hissed when the ember bit his finger, then stared at the glowing coal with something close to awe. Scattered around the site were the men's leavings, a strip of cloth, stiff paper stained with grease, a bottle that caught the fading light. He touched each in turn, lifted them to his face to smell, to taste, to weigh in his hands. Strange objects, useless in the forest, and yet he could not let them go. The spirits whispered sharp and urgent from the tree line, their voices colder than he'd ever known. Leave it. Return to us. Do not carry their cast-offs into the dark. But he did. The wolves would not come near him. The owls would not answer. Even the river, which had always sung him to sleep, rushed past with a harsher current, as though it too had turned away. Still, he returned, again and again. Each time the men left their campsite, he crept in like a thief. He learned the smell of their food, the feel of their tools, the shape of their heavy boots. Soon, his own body began to change. His shoulders hunched less. He walked upright for longer stretches, though his steps felt clumsy. He practiced the guttural syllables he had heard, stringing them into broken shapes of sound. The forest grew quiet around him. The spirits stopped whispering altogether. He was not yet of man, not any longer of spirit, but caught in the ache of something between. It happened at dawn, when the fog hung low and the trees wept with dew. The boy had followed the faint stink of smoke farther than ever before, deeper down the ridge, where the ground grew flat and the forest thinned. His bare feet found a hardness there he had never known, not soil, not stone, but a strange black path, cut clean through the earth. Across the path, the trees broke open into something he could not name, a clearing without wildness, a stretch of land bitten down to stubble. And there, against the pale sky, stood a cabin. He froze, every sense alive. Voices drifted faintly from within, low and steady, Not the booming laughter of the hunters, but something quieter, something more dangerous. The boy pressed himself against the earth, heart hammering. He should flee. He knew he should flee. And yet, he could not. The woman stepped out, her arms full of split logs. Her hair was bound tight, her face stern and tired. She did not see him. For a long moment, he stayed hidden, breathing the scent of smoke and soap, hearing the rough scrape of her boots against the porch. It was the first time he had seen a home built by men, and in that instant, he knew the forest could no longer keep him from them. The boy crept closer, step by step, until he reached the wall itself. He peered through a gap in the boards and saw the small glowing world within. Flames dancing inside a stone mouth, jars lining shelves, tools glinting like captured stars. A man sat at a table, the woman moving around him, their voices weaving a rhythm of order and closeness the boy could not name. But he leaned too far, and the board groaned. The man's head snapped up. The boy vanished into the brush, but the door flew open before he could flee. The woman's gaze cut the clearing, sharp as a hawk's. It found him. For the first time, a human gaze locked onto his own, and he did not run. The woman did not cry out. She tilted her head, palm open as though beckoning a lost child. The man's voice rumbled low, firm but without anger, and from the tree line, the spirits cried out in warning, "Do not cross. Stay with us. Do not enter their walls." A wolf howled, mournful and long, but the boy stepped forward, and then, across the threshold, the door closed behind him, muting the cries of the spirits, the song of the forest, the call of all he had ever known. For the first time in his life, he was inside the world of men. The cabin's air struck him like another world. Warmth pressed against his skin, steady and even, without wind or smoke to carry it. The walls closed around him, smothering the sky. He crouched low, eyes fixed on the fire caged in stone, unsure whether it was comfort or trap. The woman placed bread and broth before him. He sniffed it, suspicious, then tore into it with hunger, coughing on the salt. The man and woman exchanged looks but said nothing. Their words meant nothing to him, blunt stones that cracked the air. He only watched them with wide, unblinking eyes, while in the corners of the room the spirits pressed close, whispering still, "You do not belong. Leave before you are bound." But he stayed. Nights were worse. The house groaned. The roof pressed heavy. He curled on the floor beside the fire, clawing at the walls, desperate for stars. The woman tried to cover him with a blanket. He tore it away. The man's voice rumbled steady, insistent, but it could not drown the faint cries of the wolves outside. Through the window pane, the moon looked down at him. He pressed his forehead to the glass, hearing the forest's muffled call. He almost tore it open, almost slipped back into the dark. But the woman's hand touched his shoulder, steady, gentle. He froze. For the first time, he did not answer the spirits. Days passed. He was clothed in stiff fabric, boots forced onto his feet. He learned to walk upright without crouching. Though his steps landed awkward, words were pressed into his mouth. Bread, knife, fire, until his throat ached. He mimicked their table, their tools, their order, but with each lesson, something inside frayed. The walls smothered the forest's song. The spirits grew faint. The wolves stopped calling. He belonged to neither world, not yet man, no longer wild. It did not last. The words crumbled like ash. The clothes itched until his skin burned. The fire mocked him from its stone mouth. At night, the spirits came stronger, fierce in his dreams, wolves circling, rivers roaring, trees bending low with warning. Return, return, you are ours. One night, he broke. He tore free of his clothes, clawed open the door, and ran. The night air struck him like an old embrace. Behind him, voices shouted, hands reached, but he was already gone, feet cutting the earth, lungs filled with wild air. The wolves ran with him. The owl swept above. The spirit's cries became song again, fierce and welcoming. He had not been born for walls or tamed fire. He had been born for the wilderness, and it had claimed him back. By dawn, he was gone. The mountain folk still whisper of him, tracks where no man should tread, a shadow slipping between pines, a cry carried on the wind, half human, half wolf. Hunters leave offerings at the base of old trees. Storms roll down from the peaks, shaking cabins, and some say it is him, reminding men that the mountains belong not to them, but to him. The boy who crossed into men's world and found it empty, the child of spirits and wolves, the son of the wilderness. And if you wander too far into the hollows, if you linger where the mist never lifts, you may hear him still, a breath in the trees, a shadow between roots, a voice that does not belong to man, echoes of the wild.
If you enjoyed this segment, hit the like button and share. And don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.